started because I'm already over, or I'm going to go over. Hey all, my name's Forrest, and I'm going to be talking about The Flame of the Flood and the Bumpy Long Tail. So just real quick, hi, it's me. I'm a game designer. I run a company now. I work as a level designer, systems designer on a whole bunch of stuff. Frontlines, Homefront, Bioshock, and most recently The Flame of the Flood. And what I'm going to be talking about today is basically the story of a single game's performance from around 2014 through today. And I want to point out, like really early on, this is an anecdote. It's basically one story. Don't interpret this as a business plan. I'll feel awful if anybody looks at what I say and then says, "Oh, we'll just do that," and find themselves in a state of ruination. So just this is our story, and I want you to draw your own conclusions from it. And basically, I'm just going to be looking at sort of the business of making a game. So, to start, we started with a Kickstarter. That's how we funded the game initially. When we formed the studio, we knew we were going to need something to help, help feed us as we built this game. And we decided to go to Kickstarter because we didn't really know what else we were going to do at that point. And it really did work out pretty great for us. We asked for $150,000, which was like the bare minimum that we're going to need to make this thing. And we ended up getting around $250,000. So just a brief aside into how we actually did that. We launched the Kickstarter. This was in 2014, so sort of a different era in Kickstarter than where we are now. We launched it in conjunction with a 12-page feature on us in Game Informer. And they were the only press that knew about it at the time. That was because we pursued this beforehand and had somebody on site. They did a big feature. With that, we knew we were going to launch with that story, so we made the Kickstarter launch concurrent with that, and we also had emails ready to go to every major press outlet that we knew we were going to fire out the moment we set it live. And we also informed basically any friend with more than 1,000 Twitter followers that we were doing this and gave them links and said, please, please, please tweet at this time. So all that, it worked. It worked great. We launched. We turned it on Twitter that day. We did actually, it was funny, we fired off all the emails and I got very shortly after firing this off, like, hey, we're doing a Kickstarter, here's who we are. I got a very polite, this looks great, just, so you know, as a policy, this particular outlet doesn't cover Kickstarters, and they actually had an article up on us a few hours later. So we were able to kind of break through these walls, but all that being said, it still took a week before we funded. So anyway, moving forward, we did the Kickstarter, and then afterwards, one benefit of that is it got us in conversations with lots of publishers, with first parties, and we were able to land an exclusivity deal, which really did help. $250,000 might seem like a lot, but for 6 people over the course of a year, that's really not going to be that much, especially when you start factoring in all the costs associated, such as fees, taxes, fulfillment, and the other stuff we're going to need to pay for, like localization, QA, promotion, etc. And at this point, so we had the money we were going to get, and I'm just going to kind of breeze through production a bit, which was basically the next year. So this was after the Kickstarter, after negotiating some deals, we just started showing off the game. We showed it off at a bunch of places as we developed it over the course of a year. We showed off at South by Southwest, we showed off at GDC with ID Xbox, E3, Gamescom, and all this stuff generated positive press, and it really helped drive our development. Obviously we're just sort of burning through our reserves at this point, but we got really good press, so everything felt like it was moving really, really well at this point, which led into our backer beta, and this is when things started to feel like, okay, maybe there's a problem a little bit. It was like an actual beta. This was only for people who backed us on Kickstarter. And it was certainly rocky. The game was very thin. It was very thin on features. It was brutally difficult. Maybe stayed brutally difficult to this day. But all this led up to our early access launch, which was actually sort of our first test, our first opportunity to see, okay, how's this thing actually going to do in the market? And it did not great. So I just sort of truncated the Kickstarter number there. We'll just say it's quite a bit bigger than what we're actually doing in early access, which was a bit disheartening because, at this point there are games in early access that are doing amazingly well, and we were clearly not one of them. It sort of wasn't a particularly good launch, and then it really petered out pretty quickly. I put our monthly burn over there to the right just so you can have a sense of like what it costs to just operate. And you can see like based on the amount coming in versus the amount going out, this does not add up to a particularly sustainable situation. So we were in early access for about 5 months, and then we actually fully launched. We were like, okay, well, early access, maybe early access isn't our thing, maybe there are actually 2 launches, maybe there's 1. At this time, there's a lot of conversation around that. And it seemed okay, but it was still substantially less. Again, I'm going to strike through that Kickstarter thing. It was a lot less than the Kickstarter. It was like maybe not terrible, but it did not seem particularly good. We got decent reviews at this point, a couple 90s, but again, it didn't look like that was heading the direction we wanted to be, and revenue was falling fast month after month. So an important piece of context for this is around this time, our understanding of how a game is going to perform in the market is based entirely on the way that a AAA game performs on the market, which vaguely is like this. You know, you've got your launch, then the next month it's bad, the next month it's bad, then it's almost nothing, and then maybe there's a sale or there's Christmas or something like that that happens, and then you're done. So you basically have 2 shots at it, the second shot's going to be smaller, and that's essentially how selling a game works. So for us, these trends were not looking very good. And this is really for us where hope started clashing with reality. This was kind of the hope, I guess. Although honestly, like realistically, the hope was that we could at least put ourselves back to a salary level that was much like what we left when we left AAA jobs, and hopefully make enough money that we could fund our next game without needing to go to crowdsourcing or external money. The reality was a little bit more like this. We had a few months of runway, and it really didn't look like the game was going to sustain us for much longer. And concurrent with all this, you launch the game, you're disappointed, you can't just like leave it. We've got post-release support, so we had to deal with patching. We had an FMOD crash that occurred on launch and was killing our user reviews, and also our IGN review because the reviewer's computer couldn't run the game for more than 5 minutes without crashing. So, you know, after pushing hard for weeks, we had to push hard to fix things up. And a lot of this was we hadn't QA'd enough. We couldn't afford it. We didn't do it, and it bit us in the ass. Also around this time, the team started to contract. We had 2 engineers that we worked with over the course of the Flame and the Flood, and at this point, one of them decided to leave, which, no hard feelings, totally understand. Like, as per the charts I was just showing you, things didn't look good, and I totally get this. We would want to, you know, go to something a little more stable. So yeah, there was like generally a bit of existential dread around this point, but like, well, we took a shot, what are we gonna do? But we started to get lucky. So I saw around this time a job posting, they were looking for 5 experienced Unreal devs, and our team was 5 people, and it was literally a one-to-one batch for this particular company that was trying to hire for this project. So I reached out to them, and that project was Psychonauts II. And I just basically pitched like, hey, how would you like to fill all 5 of these roles today? And the folks we knew over there were like, yeah, this seems like a pretty good idea. So for us, you know, we were in a pretty bad spot, but Double Fine gave us an opportunity, and we ended up working on Psychonauts II for the summer. We did a 3-month contract with them, and basically we were like the kickoff team. We were doing early prototypes, we were building out the core moveset and metrics for Psychonauts II, the first sort of art direction. It was really a fun, great opportunity, and it also, it's like, from a contracting standpoint, unbelievable. Like, you don't really get to walk into opportunities like this regularly, so we're pretty lucky. Excuse me. So, that was good. That was a good 3 months of the summer, but things kind of took a darker turn. At that point, at the end of that contract, our second engineer left. Which meant that we were a software company without engineers. So obviously that creates a bit of a problem. You know, we didn't even have the knowledge, like we couldn't even patch the game if we wanted to at that point because it required knowledge that nobody on the team had. So we just despaired. At this point, we decided to take a vacation, kind of shut things down. We ended up closing the studio for about 6 weeks because I think we were all like burned at that point. You know, we had worked hard to make the game. It disappointed us how it ended up doing, and then it had just been sort of like, ugh, you know, just problems. And we sort of needed to think through like what our options were going forward. we didn't even know if we could keep the company going at that point. You know, like you can't run a software company without engineers. But throughout this time, taking time off and sort of creatively figuring out what we wanted to do, also we couldn't afford an engineer at that point, as per the charts. So I was still at this point busy, just doing some negotiation stuff, keeping the business, like, it wasn't a total vacation, but it was theming grim. That led into the fall, and hey, things started to look up a little bit. You know, obviously there was some doldrums through the summer there, but you know, into Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were seeing the numbers from the Steam sale, and it actually seemed like we were getting a little bit of money in. Also around this time, we signed a deal with a publisher, Curve Digital. They were going to do the PS4 port. So that was signed, sealed, they were paying for it. So for us, it was like, oh, I guess if it works, we make some money. If it doesn't, we didn't lose anything. But it was moving along and builds were happening, and this was actually starting to build a little momentum. And we actually found a new member. We found an engineer to join the team, whom, incidentally, I met at Fig Talks prior to that year, because he had come to the talk that I given about designing the Flame of the Flood. This guy, Alan Villani, who was a former tech director at Midway and Turbine, super fortunate for us to find somebody that experienced. But yeah, things started to feel like there was a pulse at this point. Like it didn't seem like it was good, but it was also like, okay, we actually feel like there's a path forward. And then the end of year happened. End of year lists started popping up, stuff like, you know, Misc Gems from last year, you know, various top 10 lists and whatnot. And the Xbox continued to perform. You know, I had the chart was like Steam sales, but you know, Xbox was plugging along honestly month after month, so it was continuing to grow the charts. And just a quick aside on this, like how does visibility continue to happen? Like there's obviously these sort of key events that happen, like a major streamer or a major publication covers you, something happens to get word out about. But throughout it all, there's streamers. There's just people that are playing all the time and just sharing the game. Usually the audiences are pretty small, but I think my theory is it helps sustain interest and helps sort of continue to pop up visibility on the game. But the one thing that is interesting is I was only ever able to correlate a streamer with a sales bump in one instance, and that was Markiplier. And he's not the only million-plus view video of this game that's out there, but it's the only one that I can map. This is just like daily Steam sales. So there's this little spike, and there's nothing else going on there around the game but that particular video. So, you know, there's a lot of thinking that streamers are kind of this like holy grail of getting word out. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot that are just there for their own audiences, but you know, the right person can make at least a measurable bit of difference, which is nice. Anyway, I just thought it was a neat little piece of data. So, into the new year, the PS4 version launched. Concurrent with the PS4 version, there was a media company that was hired to help promote it, get interviews, coverage, etc. And early in that year, we got some great articles. Like Engadget did a piece on us that was orchestrated by this PR company. Vice did one that was out of the blue, like nobody had anything to do with that. NPR, we actually, the PR people that were working with us emailed me when this NPR article went live, and they're like, did you do this? We didn't do this. And I was like, no, I thought maybe you did. Like, all I got was a DM on Twitter asking for assets from NPR's editor. I was like, okay, cool. Their IGF nominations came out. We were nominated for a couple awards. And it felt like at this point, really, the dialogue around the game started to change. Like, people went from, like, blank stares to they actually recognized, you know, they'd heard of the game at that point. Which helped us refocus a little bit. Like we were working on something new, but we took a break on that and decided to do a big quality of life patch and just sort of invest a little bit more in the game because it's alive. There's a heartbeat. This thing is actually like moving along. So you know, we took a couple months to just work on this and kind of help improve the game and smooth out issues that we had been unhappy with up to that point. So I think a big part about this turnaround was Curve, who's, as I mentioned, a publisher, and they did the PS4 port, but as part of this agreement, they were also taking over publishing for the Xbox and PC versions. And I think like for indies, the conversation around like publishers and what they can and can't do is pretty important right now. It's sort of a few years ago when we started Flame the Flood, the general consensus was waste of time, don't deal with them. Now I think the feeling is a little bit different, so it's a question of like why go with a publisher. I think the big thing is if you go with them because they have the potential to get you things that you can't get for yourself, like sales placement, dashboard placement, and inclusion in all the various other sort of services and bundles and that sort of thing that are out there, stuff like Humble Bundle, Game Pass, PS Plus, limited edition, like physical editions, that sort of thing. And Curve, I think, has done they did a great job with us, with all that, in terms of getting the word out. And from my point of view, like one of the reasons we decided, like, all right, we'll let somebody else do this is keeping up with all of this stuff and all these contacts and all these conversations is a huge job, and we were just like, there's only a few of us. It was kind of falling pretty heavily on us to keep up with that. But just like a word of caution, if you are an indie, you are talking with a publisher, there's a lot out there that is kind of trying to get their hooks in every single thing in the hope that something takes off and they can ride it without actually doing any work. Curve isn't one of them, but they do exist, and so if you're talking to somebody, just be wary of what have they actually done for anybody, because there's some not great ones. And then came the Switch. So this was, I'm sort of fast forwarding here through the year. There was sales, there was some various features and whatnot. But really the Switch was the kind of the huge thing for us. And it was really exciting because we hit number 3 in the US sales charts. And up to that point we had really struggled. Like I think it says up there. We hit number 9, I think, in the Steam top sellers briefly, like one afternoon once near where we launched. But we never really stayed there. And routinely we would actually hit with sales and stuff, with promotions, we would hit the top 25 and just stay there for days, which was great. By the way, just if anybody's looking, this was before Mario Odyssey was out. We were never above Mario Odyssey. And here, I just, because I love graphs and stuff, you can see, this is essentially like normalized revenue. There's some subtleties here in that, like, our rev share on different platforms is different based on relationship, et cetera, et cetera. There's recoup on some stuff. But you can see, like, the Switch comes in as this big, like, splash of red at the end and just becomes, like, a hugely important part of our company's revenue profile from that point forward. Oh, and one other thing, the other is just sort of a catch-all for various promotional inclusion on different, like, bundles, physical editions, et cetera. But a caveat about all this, this is from Wikipedia. I know it's illegible, that's kind of the point. This is the list of games that launched in October 2017, which is when we launched, and I dotted the ones that, to the best of my recollection, charted in the top 25 around there. So you're gonna see, like, the majority of games then are not charting in the top 25. If you're not hitting the top 25, you're not really making a substantial amount of money. So, I think there's been a dialogue that the Switch is like the silver bullet for indie success. Get your game on the Switch, you're gonna be swimming in money. That's not the case for most people, and it continues to get worse. Like at this point, the numbers released every week are higher than they were then, and the chart is even more sort of solidified at this point with Nintendo first-party stuff. But it worked great for us. Market changes, we were there pretty early. Along with this, I mentioned this a couple times, bundles, services, and physical copies. These I think were really good for us for a bunch of reasons. You don't make as much per individual copy of the game with any of these as you would just selling it, but I think it's really great for visibility, and you can see like sort of knock-on effects of like more people are playing, which leads to sales on other platforms. And also, like, as you're getting into the longer tail of the game, these are all good ways to bring in some revenue off your game. So this is something that Curve really helped out a lot with. Like, these are areas that are really hard to even just know all the right people to talk to get into all these services. So having somebody help you can be very beneficial. So how did it do overall? I mean, we're paying ourselves okay at this point. we're working on a new project in the process of pitching it. We were taken very seriously by publishers and investors. Like they're actually, wow, these guys actually can make a game, which is not a default assumption about an indie team. People have heard of the game. I was at a Mexican restaurant not that long ago wearing a Flame of the Flood t-shirt, and a guy just a few seats down was like, hey, I love that game. I was like, amazing. Because you go for, with an indie you expect like, I made this game, and you just expect there's over 2 million installs at this point, and we're able to actually reinvest in the company a bit, which is fantastic. And I just put some fan art down there because, cool, people made fan art. And I got a couple charts. This one I really like because it's cumulative. It doesn't show that we spent any money along the way. It just looks like we sat on a growing pile. Cumulative is a really, it's a satisfying way to look at revenue. This is actually sort of performance by month. So you can see like the launch was still the biggest for us, but it keeps spiking, it keeps bouncing up and down, and continues to sort of to bring in money at this point, which is great. And this is split by platform. Again, the Misc category is just sort of all the other stuff. And also all these, I'm omitting a lot from all these because there's lots and lots of other smaller stuff. Like this is basically PC's the Steam store. I'm not like going into every other store, every little bit and piece that comes along, because that would have been, you know, more Excel work than I wanted to do for you guys, sorry. And so now, working on something new, which is cool. We've changed our approach to budgeting, and essentially we've shifted things because we have a different expectation now. Our expectation is no longer that we're going to have that AAA curve of, you know, huge, small, nothing. It is, well, we can release a thing, we can continue to support it, maybe it'll continue to generate revenue over time. Imagine that this is a group photo, but I kind of forgot to do that, but we've got a team now that is very exciting, and we have an office, which we hadn't until very recently. So I think my main takeaways is that in our experience, a bad day one isn't a death sentence, although it will feel like it on that particular day. And really it takes time for recognition to reach a critical mass enough to the point that people actually like buy your game. It's like this sort of bit of marketing wisdom. I think it's something like you need to have 7 impressions before somebody will actually like recognize something. And my feeling is that when your marketing budget is nothing, it takes a long time to get to 7 impressions. And particularly for an indie game, once you do get to that number of impressions, people are like, oh, I've heard of this game, it must be good, so it doesn't even matter at that point if it is. But for us, we just sort of walked a path that allowed us to generate those impressions through releases on multiple platforms over time and pop up in different articles and parts of different promotions enough that people saw it again and again and again, and then continued to buy it again and again at that point. So yeah, like I said, this was our experience. Everybody's experience is contextual, but this is sort of how the long tail has worked out for this particular game. Thank you. I think I have time for one question. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to say here we're hiring. LessonFlood.com/jobs.
I was wondering, you know, when you have like especially like the big dips, like, and you have like that team together, how do you keep the energy as a team? I know you took a break, but how do you come back and like make it work as like so that everyone like goes forward, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Like, we were all sort of partners in this, so you know, we were all kind of invested in doing so, and not everybody did come together. So I don't feel particularly qualified. Like, I think we just continue to push forward and like say, okay, well, here's what we're going to do next, and here's how we're going to approach it, and you know, make a plan that you can shoot for. And we did that, and like, you know, these plans went sideways, and not every plan we abandoned, changed plans, but we, I think, always had a target we were trying to move towards. Yep.
Was there a specific event or reason why you decided to do the quality of life update on in the flood rather than work
Yeah, well, I mean, the game we were working on, we decided wasn't the game we wanted to be working on. We wanted to work on it, just the team didn't feel it. So we were kind of like, well, all right, if we're gonna fully like put the brakes in the thing we're working on, we should take some time and actually like support the thing that we did a little bit more. So, but it wasn't external; it was just an internal. So
you said you guys moved into an office recently?
Yep.
Were you all remote before?
we were in a co-working space.
Okay.
We had like a private office in a co-working space. Now we actually have like an office with, you know, a lease. And I can bring my dog to work now. Jason?
Chuck Reagan's soundtrack,
Yes.
which is my daughter's favorite thing to listen to on YouTube.
Okay.
Requested like weekly. Did releasing that help at all with your sales? Was there any recognition or love from that?
Well, it released concurrent with the game, so you can't. I wouldn't even know how.
Was the original release of the game?
Yeah. So I wouldn't know how to separate it. Like, it certainly helped get coverage. You know, I mean, it was certainly a good thing to have in the game, but I couldn't say for sure. Yeah.
And the announcement of the guy who found the edge of your world.
Yeah.
Remember when that came out?
Yeah. That was right around the PS4 release.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is just a happy accident. That's the
Happy accident, absolutely. Like, there was just a confluence of Vice, NPR, Engadget, IGF, PS4 launch, all within like 6 weeks. Yes.
So with Vice and NPR contacting you, I imagine to a certain extent that would be because you have a pretty unique premise that's based on something that actually is a very weird event that actually happened.
Well, that's the
So, right, but so much of that, like how much of that do you think is a factor?
Well, I think that the fact that the game was enough of a different take on things, or had enough personality, helped lead to the coverage that we got. If that answers your question.
Would you do Kickstarter again?
Probably not. I mean, just like, I think it's a platform to which we owe our actual existence. And I have a lot of love for the Kickstarter, the folks there at the team. I just think we're operating at a scale now that, like, we're a team of 11 at this point. The amount of money you